I used to spend hours playing hide and seek with my friends when we were kids, but it wasn't your usual game. We played a team version, so it felt different, more intense. Instead of just one seeker tagging everyone, we'd split into a team of seekers and a team of hiders. For the hiders to win, we had to sneak our way to a specific checkpoint without getting caught. And the seekers would win if they managed to tag every single hider. To count as a tag, the seeker had to tap both hands on a hider's back, like how you do in touch football. It all started around the time we were 8, back when our group first formed on the block, and we kept the tradition going until we were about 13. I grew up in a quiet cul-de-sac where there were only 3 other houses besides mine, and each one just happened to have kids around my age living there. Right outside the cul-de-sac, there were 4 more kids who were about our age too, so from the time I was little, I always had a tight-knit circle of neighborhood friends to play with. Whenever we played hide and seek, we'd almost always stick to the cul-de-sac. It was the perfect place, with plenty of open space, trees and bushes scattered around. And since each house belonged to one of us, we had full run of every yard and driveway for the game. But what made it even better, and honestly a little more exciting, was that our cul-de-sac sat right in front of the town's nature preserve park. The woods were just there, looming quietly, offering shadows to slip into and trails to duck down. It added an edge to our hiding spots, making the game feel like an adventure every single time we played. It was 2008, and I was 11 years old, back when a Friday night meant playing hide and seek with the crew, instead of trying to impress girls or hanging out at the mall. That night, there were just 6 of us, so we split into 2 teams of 3 and decided to keep it simple. My team was up to hide first, and the other team started their countdown from 30 as we all scattered in different directions, heading towards separate houses to find the best spots. I sprinted over to my next-door neighbor's place, already running a plan through my mind, something that felt clever enough to buy me time. My friend had this old green blanket draped over his patio, tucked under a couple of flower pots. I carefully lifted the pots aside, trying not to let them clink together, and pulled the green blanket free. Folding it around myself like a cloak, I crawled across the patio, inching my way toward the bushes that lined the edge of the woods. Since our street backed right up against the nature preserve, we had the choice to use the woods as hiding spots if we wanted to, depending on whether a house had a back fence or not. My neighbor's family had chosen not to fence in their yard, which meant their property faded directly into the tree line, the dark edge of the woods blending into the grass of the backyard. I was about to settle into my spot when I heard the backyard gate creak open. My heart jumped, and without thinking twice, I bolted into the shadows of the woods, the green blanket flapping around me like a makeshift ghillie suit. I knelt down just inside the tree line, the damp earth pressing cold against my knees as I adjusted the blanket to cover myself completely, blending in with the underbrush, hidden from view, with the faint rustle of leaves around me and the quiet hum of the night settling in. Every so often, I would carefully lift the edge of the blanket just enough to peek out, scanning the backyard to see who was getting close. Eventually, I spotted one of my friends creeping around, moving low as he checked under the patio table and around the flower pots, trying to find any sign of me. While he was distracted, poking around corners and lifting up garden chairs, I took the chance to shuffle on my knees, inching my way through the cold grass toward the backyard of the house next door. As I crawled, I could hear the muffled commotion of someone getting caught, one of my teammates letting out a frustrated groan as they got tagged. I paused, lifting the blanket again to get a better look, my breath caught in my throat. Across the yard, I saw someone from the other team, their silhouette shifting in the dim light as they escorted my teammate back out toward the street where the checkpoint was set. The air felt sharp and cold against my face as I realized this was the perfect chance to run for it while they were distracted. I slowly let the blanket slide off, letting it fall to the damp ground with barely a sound. My eyes darted around the backyard one last time, scanning the shadows and corners, trying to calm the pounding in my chest as I got ready to make my break for it. And then it happened. A single, sharp crunch broke the quiet. The sound of a shoe pressing down on fresh leaves and snapping twigs, so close that it was right behind my ears. I barely had time to flinch, the cold night air turning even colder in that split second, before I felt two hands clamp down on my shoulders, gripping me with a strength that sent a sharp jolt of pain through my arms. I let out a squeal, the sound cutting through the quiet backyard, and screamed, "Stop!" as I twisted out of the grip, slipping free just long enough to break into a sprint, running as fast as I could for the checkpoint, my breath ragged and loud in the dark. I didn't end up making it to the checkpoint anyway. Just as I was tearing across the yard, I ran straight into one of the seekers right by the backyard gate. We both froze for a second before he tagged me, and that was it. I was out. Together, we walked out to the street, where I found out both of my teammates had already been caught. The two other seekers were already there too, standing under the streetlight, catching their breath and laughing. "Wait," I said, confusion creeping into my voice as I scanned each of their faces, the cool air sharp in my lungs. "If all of you guys are already out here, then who was the one who found me in the woods?" They all glanced at each other, puzzled, shifting uncomfortably under the glow of the streetlight. No one said a word for a moment, the silence stretching thin. Then each of them started denying it, swearing they hadn't even stepped foot into the woods that night, not once. I watched their faces closely, trying to catch a smirk or a laugh that would give away the prank, but there was nothing. Just confusion and a growing unease that I could see reflected in their eyes. And that's when it hit me. They were telling the truth. My heart skipped a beat, leaving a cold emptiness in my chest before it came roaring back, pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, beating twice as fast as normal. When I told them that someone had been in the woods and had grabbed me hard, none of them believed me at first. They thought I was messing around, trying to make the game more exciting. But I didn't let it go, and the fear in my voice eventually got through to them. I saw the color drain from a few of their faces as it clicked that I wasn't joking. We all ended up going to tell our parents, voices shaking as we explained what had happened. The cops were called, and they came out to check the woods. But of course, by then, there was nothing to find. Nothing but the dark, quiet trees swaying under the moonlight, hiding their secrets. Unfortunately for my neighbor friend, his parents decided to put up a fourth fence wall, closing off their backyard completely from the woods. It felt like a piece of our freedom had been taken, but they didn't want to risk it again. We still kept playing hide and seek and flashlight tag even after that night, carrying on with our games until we were around 13. The only difference was that our parents made us carry flashlights from then on, And they left all the backyard lights on, flooding the yards with harsh white light that made the shadows look even darker in the corners. And of course, the woods were completely off limits after that. I'm grateful to have those memories of playing with my friends as a kid, memories that still make me smile when I think back. But no matter how many good times we had, it doesn't change the fact that what happened that night was one of the most horrifying experiences of my life. This happened when I was 10 years old, back when I lived in a small, quiet town in New York State, a place where nothing much ever really happened. The days all felt the same, slow and quiet, and the house next door to mine had been sitting empty for as long as I could remember, its windows dark and its lawns slowly getting overgrown. Then, one day, everything changed. A moving truck rumbled up in front of the house, its engine cutting through the usual silence, and a woman stepped out, followed by a kid who looked about my age and a toddler clutching a toy. I was sitting on the stoop with my dad, just talking about nothing in particular, so we got up and walked over to greet them right away. The mom seemed normal enough at first, polite and smiling, but there was something about her that felt a little off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was this strange stiffness in the way she moved, like she was constantly on edge. My dad and the woman started talking, and before I knew it, they were introducing me to the boy, the one who looked about my age. He said his name was CJ, and then, without saying another word, he reached out his hand for a handshake. For kids our age, that was weird, really weird. We usually just nodded or maybe gave each other a quick hey before running off to play, but he just stood there, hand out, waiting. I remember the awkwardness of it as I reached out and shook his hand, his grip cold and firm, his eyes staring straight into mine without blinking. Then, just like that, our parents wandered off to keep talking, leaving the two of us standing there in the front yard. My dad didn't waste any time pressuring me right there on the spot to take CJ upstairs and hang out with him. I wasn't really against it. I didn't have much else to do, so I led him inside and up to my room. I plopped down on my bed, expecting him to sit or grab something to look at, but instead, he just stood there, staring at me. His eyes were blank, but there was something in the way he looked that made the air feel heavier, a quiet creepiness that made me shift uncomfortably on the bed. Trying to break the silence, I asked if he wanted to play Mario Kart, hoping that would finally get him to smile or react. But he just tilted his head slightly and said he didn't know what that was. That caught me off guard. I grabbed a few of my video games and started showing them to him, flipping through the cases, explaining how fun they were. But he just shook his head and said he didn't like video games. The room felt awkwardly silent again, the air thick with the quiet between us. So I quickly suggested we go outside and play hide and seek instead. To that, he finally nodded, agreeing without a word, and for the first time, I saw the tiniest hint of a smile flicker across his face before it was gone. I told him he could hide first so he could get familiar with the properties, giving him a 60-second head start. Without saying anything, he turned and bolted into his new backyard, disappearing around the corner of the house as I started counting down from 60, my voice echoing lightly across the quiet yard. When it finally came time to go find him, I didn't even have to look hard. I found him in literally the most obvious spot he could have chosen, standing stiffly behind the chimney, a place I had to walk past just to get into the backyard. He didn't crouch down or even try to blend in. He was just there, standing completely still, his eyes following me as I came around the corner. At that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if there was something off about this kid, like maybe he wasn't all there. His blank stare, the way he stood without even trying to hide properly, made something inside me twist uncomfortably. We played for about 10 more minutes, but the whole game felt pointless, the kind of anticlimactic hide-and-seek that just drags on awkwardly. Every spot he chose was obvious, and every time I found him, he just stood there, watching me with that same empty look. It started to creep me out, and eventually I decided I'd had enough. "I've got homework to do," I told him, using it as an excuse to end the game. He looked at me for a moment, then asked, "Can I come inside with you?" I froze, not sure what to say. Every excuse I tried to come up with, saying my parents wouldn't allow it, that I really needed to focus, that it wasn't a good time. He would brush off with another question, finding a new way to ask if he could come inside. His persistence was unsettling, the way he kept pushing, his voice flat but steady. Eventually, though, he finally left me alone, turning and walking back toward his house without another word. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I had been holding and went back inside, shutting the door behind me and locking it, just in case. Realistically, I didn't have any homework. I just didn't like the kid, and I didn't want to give him any reason to think we were going to be friends. There was something about him, something I couldn't quite name, that made me want to keep my distance. That night, something terrifying happened. I woke up to the sound of a dull thud against my bedside window, the noise pulling me out of a deep sleep and leaving me sitting upright, heart already pounding in the quiet darkness of my room. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I got up and lifted the window to see what was going on, expecting maybe a branch or a bird. Instead, I froze. There, at the upstairs window of the house next door, was CJ's face, pale and eerily still in the moonlight. His eyes were wide and unblinking as he leaned out his window, staring straight at me across the dark gap between our houses. Then, in a voice that felt too loud for the middle of the night, he called out, "Come over and play hide and seek." My stomach dropped. I yelled back across the night air, telling him he was insane and to leave me alone, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "Go back to sleep," I shouted, my hands gripping the window frame tightly. Then I slammed my window shut, the glass rattling from the force, and yanked the blinds down hard, blocking him out. I tried to get back into bed and shake it off, telling myself it was just a weird kid being weird, but my mind was racing too fast to settle. And then, just when I started to calm down, there was another sound, a sharp, sudden tap against the glass, like a rock or something small being thrown. I ignored it, pulling the blanket up to my chin and squeezing my eyes shut. But then it came again, another sharp tap, and my whole body tensed under the covers. When the noise finally stopped, I let out a slow breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. The room felt quiet again, and for a few minutes I thought it was over, that he had finally gone to bed and left me alone. But about 10 minutes later, I heard another noise, this time coming from directly below my window, outside. It was faint at first, a soft rustling, almost like the sound of a bird hopping along the ledge or scratching at the siding. I strained to listen, every muscle in my body tight, and the sound kept getting closer, inching its way toward my window. Then there was a thud, low and heavy, right beneath the window. I didn't know what to think, lying there frozen, my breath caught in my throat. What if CJ was out there, trying to climb up to my window in the middle of the night? The thought was so disturbing, so absurd, that for a second it almost felt comical, like something out of a nightmare that I would laugh about later, if it wasn't so real in that moment. Then I heard it, the faintest creak of the floorboards near my bedroom door. I turned my head toward the doorway, confusion giving way to pure terror as I saw him. CJ was standing there, right in my doorway, in his pajamas, his pale face barely visible in the dim glow of the hallway light leaking into my room. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and locked on me. In a voice so quiet it made my skin crawl, he whispered, "Let's play hide and seek." I screamed. Before I could even scramble out of bed, my dad was in the room, bursting through the door so fast it was like he had flown down the hallway. His eyes went wide as he saw CJ standing there, and for a moment the room was frozen in stunned silence, the air thick with confusion and fear. Then my dad's expression shifted from shock to anger. He grabbed CJ firmly by the arm, his jaw clenched, and marched him out of the room and down the hallway. I jumped out of bed and rushed to my window, peeking through the blinds to see what was happening outside. I watched as my dad, still gripping CJ's arm, stormed across the yard to the new neighbor's house. Even from my window, I could see the anger on his face, the way he raised his voice, yelling at the woman as she opened the door in confusion. He shouted, gesturing sharply toward our house, his voice carrying across the quiet street. He raised his voice again and again as she stood there, looking shocked and flustered. It turned out that CJ had simply climbed in through an unlocked window downstairs while we were asleep. The thought of him sneaking through our dark house in the middle of the night made my skin crawl every time I thought about it. My dad wasted no time after that. He got a restraining order against the woman and her son, trying to keep them away from our family. But it didn't change the fact that they still lived right next door, and they weren't going anywhere.